Welcome, friends, back to part 5 on how to cultivate the artist's life. Perhaps a little bit of a recap here with Deacon Kotar, and then a final thought to leave with us about all of this. So the last conversation that we just had, just to catch us up, was this sense that mastering oneself as part of the first path is what opens you up to be able to discern when the second part of the path reveals itself to you. And that creativity is not something that we do in a spirit of abandon without a sense of, mastery and a sense of order and a sense of intentionality that goes into our creativity. And the more that we learn to do that, perhaps the easier, or I don't know, maybe the more creativity can open up, or we can be co-creating. So
Yeah, I don't know if it's easier, but it does open up.
okay,
What ends up happening is that you move out of a strictly, well, a lot of times we create out
utilitarian.
of fear, don't we? We
Mm.
create out of a sense of limitation. We create out of a sense of boundaries. Don't cross this. Don't do that.
Mhm.
And it's even sometimes that's more, in the moral sphere, but sometimes it's simply expressed in this uh, in the language of genre. Like, I must not transgress the limits of genre, or the market um,
I won't
won't
know how to
like
sell it.
my
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
I won't sell any copies. And you hear that kind of thing all over the place. Except what they never tell you is that it's the things that transcend genre that become the cultural touch points.
Mhm.
Star Wars is not the great cultural force it is because it hews to genre. It's because it transcends every genre that it inhabits, and it inhabits several at the same
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
And these are things that you can't force. They happen. They occur as a kind of opening up as opposed to a kind of closing in. Even though you do have to close in on yourself initially, and that's part of the mastery, or the competence process. But if we've begun that path of self mastery, of discipline, of discernment, of slowly entering into the creative space, we will begin to see how cultivation can happen. And this is where, and I mentioned this in the previous video, too many people give advice when it comes to the creative life that is specific to this stage, and it's
Mm.
impossible to implement, or very difficult to implement, unless you've initially done the work of becoming simply a competent human. So if you hear advice that tells you about, so let's say, time blocking your day, or working or doing one project per quarter,
Or how
or
to steal the Arkenstone from smoke in 10 easy steps.
there we go. Exactly. Um, you read those steps, you apply them to your life, and you just take it as a template and lay it over your own life, thinking this template must be universal. So I'm going to go and do it. And what
Mhm.
ends up happening more often than not, unless you're perfectly aligned with with the character of the person who gave that advice, which sometimes happens, you're probably going to find that the system as applied onto your life is untenable, undoable,
Right.
and will in fact have the opposite effect.
Yep.
So this happens a lot, especially when people talk about writing rituals, when they talk about the rules of being a pantser, or a plotter.
Mhm.
All of this stuff, it's all firmly in the cultivation stage, and it's very difficult to implement unless you've done the work first. So how do we then think about the second path, the cultivation of the artist's life, in a way that is useful for us in this context? How can we start thinking about it, since I'm delivering to you that you need, all of you, including me, need to still do a lot of work in the first step? Well, this is where you start to really layer on top, or deepen within, the steps that you did in part one. And I'm not going to say much about this at this point because it's not helpful. And I think that there will be, the way that I'm envisioning it right now is that next year I will be talking about each of these steps in monthly webinars inside my community space, the Story Hearth. And it's going to be at the end of 2025 that we're going to get to the specific steps of how you actually cultivate. But it's going to be uh, simultaneously practical and noetic and soulful. It's going to be all three things at the same time.
Mhm.
Because by this point, we will have traveled through a lot of the initial steps. But if I can offer anything concrete to you here, it's something like this. When you get to a point where you feel like you can venture along the second path, where you can start the process of cultivation, it will largely be something that happens to you, not that you do to it. There will be
Mm.
things that open up inside you. You will suddenly see and find uh, blocks of time that didn't exist before that are perfectly tailored for a specific action. Now, this is not to say that suddenly, without having put any work into the discipline stage, you're going to be able to do this. No, this is after you've worked on this a lot and after you've suffered a lot. All right. This is the part that I'm not talking about, but there is suffering at every stage of this, which you should all be okay with because it always leads to great rewards at the end of it. But this is where you're able to then talk about things like what are the specifics of a genre? How am I going to implement a writer's ritual into my life? What time of day is going to be dedicated to what part of my cultivation of this craft? Which books do I choose to read this month that are going to stretch me creatively, that are in a genre that I did not think I could handle? And what in what way will I stretch my writing muscles to try out a technique that I haven't tried out before? This is where it's probably not a bad idea to start not simply talking in community with others, but seeking out the wisdom of those who have done one of those things far better than you, and to start nurturing a relationship with them, whether that's a relationship mentor-mentee, or whether you buy courses, or whether you simply become friends with people that are a few steps ahead of you. This is the part where things really start to become joyful and really start to open themselves up to you. And this is also something that you do forever. So the twofold path then becomes not two paths, but one path that you travel in on two separate levels and two separate layers at the same time.
Mhm.
And there are aspects of discipline that will help you with control. There are aspects of discernment that will help with taste. There are aspects of creativity that will help with craft, and the other way around. So this is where things get really, and this is where it's hard to talk about these things unless you're actually doing it, unless you're actually doing it with others who have done it either with you or before you, or who are looking up to you. Maybe you then become the one who becomes a teacher for someone else.
So, in that spirit, then share with us. You have a community that you are launching as of this video called Story Hearth, and you plan to make this available perhaps next year. Can you share with us a little bit about what that is and what your dream is for it?
Story Hearth arose organically. It's already been in existence for about a year, but I haven't really talked about it in public a lot. The reason being that it came about as a matter of necessity for some writers that were applying to another program that I run called St. Basil Writers Workshop. Now, St. Basil's is intended for writers who have either written a complete work or have already published, and it's very much a leveling up. It's very much a cultivation stage event. But it turns out that a lot of people have not yet done enough of that work to be able to be competent enough to submit and be accepted into that program. So I needed to create a space where people were working towards becoming competent enough as writers to be able to be accepted into that program. And it became something more. It became a place where a small group of very warm-hearted Christian writers got together and started to do things like accountability. I spent this year offering them a Foundations of Publishing webinar series, which will become a regular part of the community as a separate course starting in 2025. We're going to do the final 2 webinars this month and the next month, and then next year I'm going to be focusing specifically on this, on the cultivation of the artist's life as a central theme for the community. And there will be an opportunity for people who are at different stages of the twofold path to enter and find usefulness in it. There's a area where you will just be able to take part in community and nothing else. There's an area where you'll be able to take part in a series of courses, and then there's also an area where you will be able to partake in one-on-one coaching as well. So the information I'm sure you'll provide everybody, Dominic, but this is something that I've been working on for about a year, and it's coming along quite nicely, and I'm very excited to see where it goes in the future.
I think that's phenomenal. So I'll have a link in the description. Folk can head over to your website to learn more about that. I would like to think that legend fiction of the same value to the world. I don't think it has the same spiritual depth, sadly. Or maybe it's there and it's latent, and we just focus a whole lot more on how writing can be fun and how not the missteps on the journey, but some of the side quests or just the quests that you can go on while you're engaging on this long journey, or these long quests can also be a whole lot of fun too, because there's also this, you've sort of pointed out, this life-bringing enjoyment of the creative process. And so we decided to, lean more into that. But of course, I welcome people to join
we complement
both.
each other beautifully. I'm the dual Russian, so you all need a little bit of that enjoyment and playfulness, and Legend Haven certainly provides that.
Yeah. So I hope people can check out both links and consider, following Deacon and maybe joining his community if it's a good fit for you. And maybe Legend Fiction can also be a fit for you too. Check them both out. But ultimately, the point is, how do we? I love your point, as a community of solitary people, and most of us are introverts, so that's very easy. But as a community of solitary mind, people seeking to better integrate or engage with what it means to actually be mature and creative, and how do we find a way to do that together? So, thanks again for this series, Deacon. It's been a real pleasure. I hope people have enjoyed it, and if you did, say hi in the comments, or you can visit the websites and say hi to Deacon or myself, and I'm sure we'll respond back as soon as we can.
Absolutely.